Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to design a fantasy weapon, and I had a rough idea of what I was going to do from a previous drawing. First, using Z-spheres, I thought about roughing out some extra spear type things on each side, but later I designed them differently, using one of the brushes that comes with Zbrush. So we're going to remove them just for now. Starting off with almost just a twig-like shape, I'm going to use the mirror and weld so that we can have a bottom part and then a thicker shape in the middle. Next, I turned on radial symmetry. This is a really fun way to build up designs quick, as you can specify the number in a radial count. It's like having a certain number of cursors drawing all at once. As well, you can specify the axis that it works on. For my first design, I thought a nice gold texture would be nice to look at while working on this project. Coming back to my initial thought of the so-called branches, I'm using a brush called the snake hook brush, with radial symmetry turned on. This is a really interesting brush, as you can see. I decided to create a crystal ball holder at the top, so for this I used the geometry from the hooks and built it inwards. From there, I turned on back face masking. This is super helpful, especially when you're working in thin areas of your mesh, so that it doesn't destroy the other side. In this next part, I wanted to create some sort of crystal ball, egg shape, or a jewel at the top of the staff. I used a basic sphere and squished it and shaped it to fit. Using radial symmetry helped a lot, not just to shape it, but for smoothing as well. Applying just a basic reflective red material, and then playing with the transparency settings in display settings. To render transparencies, you will most likely get a dialog that tells you that you have to turn on transparency in the render settings. The transparency settings you can set to your liking, of course. Adding the gems on the weapon. I didn't show this part. You turn on or make sure radial symmetry is still active, and use the insert cube brush to draw in tiny cubes all over your design. This was super quick, and then I just colored them with a reflective material. It was so fast I didn't even bother duplicating downward the weapon. I just went in and placed them all. It may have taken less than a couple minutes. Here's where my design got interesting. When I was applying the base coat of paint, I wasn't sure what to go with. Maybe a wood texture of some sort, with hints of red, or a stony, rough textured. Playing with the masking settings. Ultimately, I wanted to imagine some sort of fantasy character wielding this weapon around, so I wanted to make it shiny and magical. And then something happened. I had a previous layer active when I was designing the textures in paint, and then when I clicked Bake All, it somehow turned my whole object black, and then it looked crystallized. It was really cool. I'm not really sure how or what made this happen, but I'll have to go back and figure it out. Keep in mind, Zbrush probably didn't like me much after. Perhaps a glitch of some sort. I dealt with a lot of crashing. Perhaps too magical maybe. But I went with it anyways until the end. I added more paint because I wanted to keep a bit of a wood texture design. Next, I decided to trim the branches, so to speak. If a character is wielding this thing around, they probably don't want to stab themselves in the hand. So I took care of that problem. And then I painted over the mesh areas that I clipped off. For my final design choice, I cut the weapon into 3 pieces and then added blades. What's more fun than wielding a staff around with blades on either end? So for this, I did go through a few designs. The first one I thought about using a curved blade, but if I wanted the weapon to fit together in each part, I'd have to make it straight. Always fun to play around with the deformation palette. There's tons of options for shaping your mesh. I suggest checking it out. Then I created an insert mesh brush from this blade so that you can apply it to each part really easily. Always make sure you're facing inward at where the mesh will be attached. But you can also play around with the view to get your object right on the surface that you'll be applying it to. Just doing a quick test on a sphere, you also have to make sure the mesh you're applying it to does not have subdivisions. This is the first design with the blade. For design number 2, I wanted to make it look more like a saw blade on one side. Using the slice curve brush, you can make some really neat designs by slicing your mesh into different polygroups, removing them, and then remeshing it. But for my design, it didn't really work well because joining the gaps didn't work out quite as planned. So on to design number 3. Using the previous design from number 1 and cutting extra detail into it, shaping it into more of a sword blade. This worked out quite well and I was happy with the result. Going through the same design process as before with creating an insert mesh brush and then applying it to all 3 parts of the weapon. Here's some final animated roughs in Zbrush. Here are the final designs of the thicker blade, followed by the thinner pointy blade at the end. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. It was quite the process, and I endured a lot of crashing, but in the end I'm quite happy with the result. Let me know in the comments if this would be your weapon of choice in a video game. Like, share, and subscribe for more cool designs. Bye for now.